Welcome to Good Dog Nation, the weekly video podcast that's all about having a good dog. Hosted by Kim Merritt, co-founder of GoodDogInABox.com and GoodDogPro.com, and founder of the URL Doctor. This episode is brought to you by GoodDogInABox.com, reward-based dog training and dog bite prevention products for families with kids and dogs, and GoodDogPro.com, the online content subscription and community for dog professionals with reward-based dog training products, curriculums, and online courses to educate, motivate, and positively impact those that work with dogs. Now, let's join Good Dog Nation. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Good Dog Nation. I am Kim Merritt, co-founder of Good Dog in a Box and Good Dog Pro, and we have another great episode today that we're going to talk about, all different types of things from outdoor gear for your dog and nose work to reactivity issues with dogs, a little bit of everything with our good friend, Metis Riley. And how are you, Metis?
I'm good. How are you today, Kim?
I am fine. And believe it or not, Metis is coming to us today from Anchorage, Alaska, which I just find very exciting. So let me tell everybody a little bit about Metis before we get started. She is a certified professional dog trainer, CPDT-KA, an animal advocate in Anchorage, Alaska, and soon to be Homer, Alaska, correct?
Yes. We're moving.
She has taken additional training through seminars and workshops by Suzanne Clothier, Grisha Stewart, Emily Laurelham, Pia Silvani, and Debbie Jacobs. She started her dog walking business, Downtown Dog Walker, in 2008 and ran that to 2016. And in 2016, she transitioned to reward-based training, classes, workshops, private sessions with PositiveEffectsTraining.com in Anchorage and on the Kenai Peninsula. She's fostered and volunteered with numerous shelters and rescues since 2007. And in 2010, she co-founded a nonprofit, strawfordogs.org, that helps pets outdoors. Welcome, Metis.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start with your nonprofit. So tell me, what in the world is Straw for Dogs and what do you do?
Well, great question. So it's it leads to a question is kind of the name.
Okay.
So we provide straw for dogs outdoors. And a lot of the tips that we've learned and passed on to people with pets outdoors, we've learned from mushers. So straw is something that mushers use in dog houses. It's a material that has a hollow type core instead of hay, which doesn't have that same core. It actually provides insulation in that way, kind of like a double pane window. So we started Straw for Dogs in 2010. We had been volunteers, my husband and I, at the local animal shelter here, and we had seen dogs growing up in Alaska without adequate shelter outside. So we started just getting dog houses on Craigslist or through people we knew or whatever, finding them on the side of the road and refurbishing them and then giving them away for free. So we did that for a few years, and then in 2012, we actually developed it into a 501c3 nonprofit and continued on with the doghouse mission. At this point, it looks like we have dog houses that are designed in pieces, actually, so we can bring them on site to the dog, easy to carry that way. They're insulated, floor, ceiling, and walls, and they even have a little wind break in them that we can add depending on the size of the dog.
So is your problem in Alaska more with stray dogs that don't have homes or with people that keep their dogs outside and don't bring them in?
It's pet dogs outdoors. Yes. So there is in rural Alaska, there is definitely an issue with stray dogs. Where we're at, it really is a lot of people who have dogs outside, even if the dog comes in maybe, throughout the day or at night, if they're outside for hours at a time without some shelter, because of course we're in Alaska, it gets very cold, it gets very wet, it's a very long season of that. So we really need to provide something for a dog who's outside. So just advocating for that, talking to the people about why the dog is outside. And we've also provided behavior modification, crates for indoor use, spay and neuter. We used to do a lot of rescue and rehoming. We've phased that out of our program now, and we focus on the outreach we work with our local animal shelter and their officers to help spread the word. We have a application for assistance on our website, so anyone can apply. There is no financial need that you have to display. It's just is the need of the dog.
That's awesome. I love hearing you talk about that. One of my pet projects for several years at Good Dog has been a humane education curriculum that we wrote for children called Reach and Teach. And it goes over the pet responsibility and bringing your pet inside, not leaving it outside all the time, and all the different components of being a responsible pet owner, from spay and neuter. So, and education is important. We have to educate the public. Not everybody thinks about their dog in that manner. So that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, we had such great outcomes with working with people instead of, you know, working against them. I mean, there's very limited laws anyway. So, you know, by coming friendly to their door, presenting options, we've just found that most people want to do the right thing and are happy to accept a doghouse, straw. We have a pet-free pantry.
So I'm curious, and you're such a good person to ask this question. A, because you live in Alaska, and B, because you've already admitted that you're a gear nerd. So, you know, what is the best type of gear for our dogs in cold weather? I mean, we've got dogs that not all dogs have big, thick, furry coats. We've got dogs that we have to watch their paws when the ground gets icy. So, what, as an Alaska person that deals with, you know, that type of weather all the time, what do you find to be the best gear outdoors for your dog?
Well, so this is a little different than a dog who lives outside. This is more discussing what, you know, a dog who, like my dog, I'm going to take for a hike, right? So I'm going to dress her up with some gear, and I like to use a bodysuit. She's very short hair, bully mix. So she wears a bodysuit and then maybe a layer on top, and then booties. Now, we've had some older Huskies that actually needed booties as well, even though they're really well coated. The ground itself gets so cold. And then there's also ice to consider, and then there's ice melt to consider. So chemicals, you know, of course, can be really bad. So we walk in the city a lot, so we have to consider that on the sidewalks. So booties, some of the ones I really like are the ones that look like plastic balloons, and they're called paws.
Okay.
But they just don't come off like the other ones do. Our vet did say you have to be careful that they're sized right, and that you then take them off, because they are, you know, quite tight, which is why they don't come off. So those are some of my favorite booties. I've tried the shoe type booties. I've never been able to find a good fit for my odd shaped dogs. So those have been the ones we found with most success. Some of the coats that I really like are the Herta brand coats, the Roughwear brand coats. Those just seem to last. And that's, you know, I'm going to wash it. It's going to get washed and worn. So it needs to be able to last at least a season or two.
Well, and I would think if it can last in Alaska, it can last with the rest of the country. So
yeah, hopefully.
Great suggestions. So I know that reactivity is your main focus with your training business, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And that you work a lot with your local vet. And I'd love for you to talk about that and tell us exactly how you've partnered with your local vet.
Well, I was teaching group classes actually, and one of the vets came through one of the classes with her own dog, and we really just hit it off. She's very progressive, very knowledgeable, and is now a resident behaviorist. So she's actually becoming a veterinary behaviorist. But we really hit it off, and she wanted somebody to refer to, that she would be assured there would be no harsh methods or aversive methods used, because that is really a problem still in our locale, you know, of course everywhere, but it's hard to find an actual fully positive trainer. So we really hit it off. She started referring clients to me, and it's been such a wonderful partnership, because I know that those clients have already had some of the medical workups done. They've already heard from an expert some ideas. I'm reiterating her training plan. and then I'm adding to it and working them through it. So it's a really great partnership. I would suggest to people who want to do the same, reaching out to veterinarians. I think they're so busy that, they're just easy to miss that for them. But I think,
Right.
we got lucky because we connected through dog training. But for somebody else, maybe they need to reach out to their vets.
Right, right. And, I know that today we have so many expectations as dog owners for how our dogs are supposed to behave. But, the reality isn't necessarily always what a dog owner thinks. What do you see in your training practice, particularly with reactivity, with expectations versus what's the reality?
Well, yeah, I definitely think that our expectations have changed for dogs. We expect them to go everywhere, places that maybe dogs didn't go before, like a baseball game or the hardware store, someplace that might seem very busy and scary for a dog. And we tend to just overexpose in the name of socialization. So I think that our expectations are kind of interesting because then we also, on the other hand, expect the dogs to stay home alone for 10, 12 hours, no problem. So
Right.
we kind of expect everything from them. And no wonder we're a little disappointed when it's not, the reality isn't meeting the expectation.
Yes, no doubt. And I'm curious. I've traveled to California several times recently. My children live in California, and I have been shocked and amazed at all the different places in California that, particularly Southern California, that people take their dogs. I mean, it is literally in Nordstrom's. There's dogs walking around inside the store. I mean, it's everywhere. And these are not service dogs. These are not therapy dogs. These are just people taking their dogs everywhere, which on one hand is great. I'm glad to
Right.
see, people having that connection with their dogs. But you don't see that on the East Coast. Um, Maybe a little in Florida, but I definitely don't see it. I've never seen to that extent in Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina. What's your feeling, and what is it like in Alaska? I mean, are people taking their dogs everywhere, or is it a little more? Is there a little more thought put into it than what we see in some states?
Well, I think people want to take their dogs
I
everywhere.
do too. I do too.
It's like they take, like I said, to the hardware store, and don't get me wrong, I've done the same thing when the weather's bad. Sure, it's a great place to take a little walk with my dog, stretch his legs. But it's interesting because it's changed, right? So I think that people want to, and I mean the dog cafes, where you can bring your dog and sit on the patio. This is very popular, and this is what almost all of my clients, have in their end goal, whether their dog is ever going to be able to be comfortable in such a situation or not.
So, what do you do to help your clients with getting them to the point that they can take their dog places like that? And then on the flip side of that, how do they know if their dog is comfortable in that environment or not?
That's such a great question. So almost all of my clients, we start with body language for dogs because that's, most humans don't understand dog body language. We really skip over it. We don't see all the subtle little tongue flicks and whale eyes that pop up, within just a second here and there. So I always start there because I want to teach concepts to my clients. I want them to understand why and how so they can continue on working with their dog. And it's not like I've just told them do X, Y, Z. I want them to understand the reason why so that they have a better understanding of how to continue. So for that, I'm going to start with basic counter conditioning and desensitization. I have a great handout from Dog Biz, Gene Donaldson's open bar, closed bar protocol. And it's something I've just used throughout the years, very little change I've done to it because it explains counter conditioning and desensitization for the average person in a way that, they understand open bar, closed bar. They don't need to say counter conditioning and desensitization every
Right.
time. And so it's really great way to get that protocol for a client. And then they understand. I mean, we use that for the vet. We use that for grooming. We use that for any scary new thing, basically, or even if it's not scary. I always call it preemptive counter conditioning. If a dog barks,
Right.
give your dog a treat. So, hey, we don't have to necessarily counter condition. We can condition in this situation.
Exactly. And yeah, I my favorite are the breweries now and the restaurants,
Yes.
and the cafes that not only allow dogs and have their little outdoor space, but actually have a menu for the dogs as well.
We haven't seen that yet, but it's coming, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, we've got a bar actually right down the street from where I live, and they have a deck. The dogs are allowed on the deck, and they actually have a menu for the dogs that
Oh,
they can
that's
order off of, which is so
funny.
funny. It's
That's
so funny. So I know that one of the things that you have done in your career is you've worked a lot with shelters.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I really would like to find out more about the canine nose work program that you developed for shelter dogs. So I'd like for you to talk about that. And for those people who are out there that don't know what nose work is, maybe we can even just start with what is nose work and how did you get into it?
Sure. So nose work is a canine game based on scent detection work. And it's a really fun way to work with your dog, and then it's not obedience based at all. So I got into it by bringing my own very shy or elderly dogs or foster dogs to nose work classes because it's such a great confidence booster. It's one dog at a time. It's nothing like what we consider a typical obedience class. It's very positive. It's, we're watching the dog. Everyone is learning to look at body language. Like I said, you're working with one dog at a time. So I just thought it was such a great stress reliever as well. I noticed that when I would be leaving nose work, even my very younger active dogs would be zonked. I mean, zonked beyond, and maybe they only ran for 20 minutes, actually. They did two, or they did 3 8-minute, walkthroughs, nose work searches, we call it. So I realized it was such a great way to engage a dog in a shorter amount of time. And of course, with our weather here, I'd been a dog walker at our animal control and had done morning walks, ice, snow, no matter what. And a lot of the women who volunteer there are older. So I thought this would be such a great way to bring something that they can do that'll really tire out the dogs in a healthy way, not overstimulating them, in the shelter environment, indoors, fairly easy for any dog to be successful at, and fairly easy for any human to be successful at, because you're not really handling the dog. So especially if you're, an 80-pound, 80-year-old woman, and here's an 80-pound lab, you might be able to work with this dog in a whole new way by doing nose work instead of just trying to walk him.
So what's the best way to get started with it?
So basically the class I designed is basically nose work night 1. And we have 5 to 7 boxes of similar size and shape. And we actually put treats in the box. So we start with treats. We're not getting up to scent and odor and all these things that competition nose work people do. We were basically just using treats. And our shelter, very lucky, we have a high turnover. So the dogs aren't there for more than a week or 2 at a time. So they don't need to progress to scent order like birch and things that competitive nose work dogs do. So we just stick with the treats. We line them up, let the dog search, then we reward at the find or at the hide, big reward at the hide, and then we do it all over again. So we maybe do 3 to 5 searches for one dog and then bring in another shelter dog. And I've developed this program and presented it and helped the volunteers here at Anchorage Animal Care and Control and at the Homer Shelter. And it's something that they're still doing to this day, which makes me very happy.
And you're seeing this as a stress reducer in those shelter dogs and enhances behavior problems?
Sure. I mean, because there's nothing like that kind of mental exercise for the shelter dogs. They're not getting that kind of They get Kongs. They do get more enrichment than they used to, absolutely. But it's just an additional way to provide enrichment. And I think it's also really great for the human, because the human's learning to see positive moments to reward. And again, they're not getting pulled around on the leash, or, it's not an issue of safety out on the ice and the snow walking. It's just fun for everyone.
Right. So I'm trying to envision. So you would have an enclosed space at
Yes.
like a yard outside. Your
Inside,
boxes.
almost always inside.
Oh, inside. Okay.
Yeah.
So one dog at a time. So the dog can be off leash and just kind of go and do their own thing and have
Exactly.
fun with it.
Yes, exactly. And we start inside to reduce distractions. So, as you advance in nose work, if you were to work towards competition, you would work towards being outdoors. But these are programs we always do indoors.
I find this to be so interesting. We had a reward-based dog trainer on last week who uses agility for the same thing, that it was a huge stress reliever and helped with dogs with behavior problems. And she had incorporated it with her own dogs and then started doing it with client dogs because the outcomes were so awesome. Same thing here, giving the dog a job, mental stimulation actually helps to reduce stress in these shelter dogs. So obviously, if you had a dog at home that had maybe some behavior problems, was at home alone a lot during the day, this would be a great exercise and probably something fairly easy to get into that you could really use to help stimulate your dog and relieve stress.
Absolutely. Yes. And actually, I do teach this to some of my reactive clients, because again, it's a great way to work in their own home. And so if they're stressed by even going out, which some dogs are, some of my more reactive dogs are, this is a great way to do something a little bit more active and more mentally stimulating in their own home. And again, great for the human.
Right. Fun. So if you wanted to do this just from a stress reducer and a mental stimulation, really you could be putting treats in just about any kind of obviously it would have to be a container that would be safe for the dog to be around, but any type of a container, and just basically hide them around the house.
Sure. I mean, actually, I have another game I teach clients who maybe actually don't want to do the boxes and go through the nose work type setup. Sometimes I'll just have clients get a few different paper plates and just feed the dog their kibble or even treats, space it out throughout the house, especially if you have one dog who you can just allow to roam and find and search.
Right.
Or if you have two dogs, you could even do that with their own meal. Of course, I would want to make sure everyone's getting their fair share and maybe separate as needed for guarding or whatnot. But yeah, you can do a different variation of it. And some of us just do naturally. I mean, I've had a lot of clients go, oh, I just do that. I do, hide treats for them and let them find them.
Right. So tell us about nose work as far as the competition. I know people that compete in this. It's a big competitive thing, just like agility. So tell us, for people who don't know, what that is, what it looks like, and what different things you can do from a competitive standpoint.
Well, I can tell you my very limited knowledge of the competitive edge end of the spectrum here, but I have observed some searches and competition, and once you get to competition level, you're doing outside searches. They call them exterior searches. They're doing they'll hide things up in cars, and again, at that level, you're not using treats anymore for the search. They're actually searching a scent. So there's the 3 different scents: birch, anise, and then there's another one that they use for competitive nose work. And they, what's so great about it is one of my reactive clients actually got a ribbon this summer from working with his dog in nose work, and he was just over the moon. I mean, he's very committed to his dog anyway, but it really helped that he was able to do something with his dog around other dogs and people, and again, one dog at a time in a safe fashion. So it was something that for him, that was a really big milestone, being able to compete with his reactive dog.
Obviously, I mean, that I can just imagine would have been very fulfilling for him to
Yeah.
be able to have an activity that it's a bonding thing that you can do with your dog.
Yes.
I, for years, had a Newfoundland, and we did draft work, and she
Fun.
would pull a cart, and in the wintertime, she'd pull a sled
Oh,
and
fun.
we had so much fun, but we had a Newfie group that we belonged to, and we would march in parades. And it's a whole nother level of things you can get into with certain breeds of dogs. And something like this,
Yes.
any breed of dog can do.
Yes, and any age and any ability. That's one of the great things about nose work is, agility. Of course, a dog needs to be a little bit more physically fit. Pulling something, a dog needs to be a little bit more physically able. So,
Right.
Being able to bring a dog to nose work, and again, it's at their pace, it's at their level. It's all about them having fun. That's the ultimate goal. It's really a great equalizer for any dog and any handler, because again, the handler doesn't have to handle the dog and stand for an hour, which some people are not physically able to do in a group class. So it's a nice way for someone to come to a class with their dog and just enjoy that time.
And can you do it with puppies as well? What's an age range that you can start doing
That's a
nose
great
type of work?
question. I don't know. I don't. I'm assuming that they have an age minimum, but I'm always working with the other end of the spectrum and the very old dogs, so I don't
Right.
really know. There's no
Have you
maximum.
have you ever in your shelter program done this with puppies, or is it mainly just adult dogs that you're working with?
It's mainly been adult dogs. So, we have seen very few puppies through straw for dogs. We almost are always working with adult dogs. So most of what we're doing with our foster dogs, or even just dogs in outreach work, is working with adult dogs.
And are you still working with your shelter programs today?
Yes, and in fact, if anybody is curious and they want some of the handouts, I'd be happy to share them with them so that they could do something like this in their own shelters.
That's awesome. And let's mention both of your websites again. So your training site is positiveeffectstraining.com.
Yes.
And your nonprofit is strawfordogs.org.
That's right. And they would contact me directly through Positive Effects Training if anyone was interested in some of the handouts and things I've created for nose work for shelter dogs.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Great.
Metis, I am so happy that you were able to join us today, and I really greatly appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's been really fun.
And we'll see everybody next week. Bye-bye.
If you'd like to participate in the rest of today's conversation for professionals who work with dogs and receive continuing education credits from participating organizations for listening, visit gooddogpro.com and subscribe today. Use coupon PODCAST to get 40% off your first month or annual subscription.